Hello, everyone. Welcome to day 7, the final day of the 7 deadly shadows. It's all about fear today. And I really do feel like this call is I'm really flying by the seat of my pants during this call because every other shadow I had notes on, except this one. Not sure what that's about, but we're going to see how it goes. There's plenty to say about fear. And the announcement that I want to make before I go into this is that this masterclass will not be disappearing. I am not taking it down and I'm not repackaging it. It will live on my YouTube forever. So if you ever want to return to this, if you want to share it with others, if there's something that you want to reconnect with, you're more than welcome to just come back anytime. So that's the first thing. I've been asked so many times, when are these going away? How long are they going to be up? They're going to be up forever. They are permanent. They are going to be a staple on my YouTube. So I hope you enjoy. And that is the big announcement that I have for you. Now let's go ahead and get into, it's so dense, lots to learn and internalize. Yeah, well, it's my goal here was to actually help you reconnect with your own soul, right? So anytime there's something that tempts you to disconnect from your own soul, only you will be able to tell what that really is. But when you have like a few cues, like these 7 deadly shadows, my hope is that you'll be able to tell, am I taking the bait? I think that's the one thing that this entire masterclass has really punctuated is, am I taking the bait? That's the question. Have I shifted out of my creatorship? Have I shifted out of my power? Was something tempting me that really was not helpful? And it will help you to reconnect to God, universe, divine source, your soul, your inner being, whatever you like to refer to it as. You will feel so much more stable and secure, and you'll have a lot more fun doing this earth thing that we're doing when you're connected consistently. Will be very helpful to refer back to. Good. I know that this was definitely dense. There is definitely a lot going on. I think we can all agree that fear is, like disconnection, fear is another overarching theme throughout all of these shadows. I could have said that fear is like the ultimate shadow, or that's the umbrella shadow, because fear always comes back to, I don't want to feel bad. If you're afraid, what you're really saying is, I don't want to be disconnected and I don't want to feel bad. Every fear that you have, you could list out, like all of you can do this if you want, and I'll tell you which shadow it's pointing to. Every fear that you have is only pointing to a negative emotion and a negative feeling state. I don't want so-and-so to die because I will feel sad, I will feel grief, I will feel despair, I will feel anger, I will feel all of these things when that happens. Well, I mean, everyone's gonna die, but when that happens, I'm gonna feel da-da-da. Or I don't want to be trapped in a basement, forcibly injected with heroin and trafficked for the rest of my life because I don't want to feel powerless, defeated, out of control, disgusted, sick, right? All of those frequencies that you don't want to feel. Everything, all roads lead to Rome when it comes to this. Now, disconnection is more of the mechanical piece. Fear is more of the feeling state. At the same time, fear is a very good metric to use. It's a good guide for you to tap into. When I said during the powerlessness call, paying attention to, does this make me feel powerful? Do I feel connected to that truth? Is there resonance within my soul happening here? Because that's unique. You're in unique point of consciousness. You're a unique point in the universe that's expanding. What makes you feel powerful and secure and what makes me feel powerful and secure are not the same thing. I'll give you it's a silly example. But there was one time that someone was telling me about basically having a fantasy of living in a commune where everything is shared. And sharing is a big no-no for me. Oh my God, there is so much of my childhood that is tangled up in it. There's so much wounding around it, like the lip gloss story, you guys already know. There is so much punishment associated with sharing that the idea of my entire life being dependent and revolving around sharing with others is actually my personal version of hell. There's nothing that sounds worse or more horrific to me. So that lights up a whole bunch of fear for me. That's like a one-way ticket to really bad feelings. But for other people, that is like the most liberating, freeing expression that they could embody in this lifetime. That fantasy, that desire is actually activating for them in all of the right ways. And again, there's no condemning happening here. This is different points of consciousness expanding in different ways that come to different conclusions, so on and so forth. This is why I don't have any interest in the homogeneity that a lot of other people are after. And it's because this experience that you're having, the fears and the desires, make you. This is the interesting thing. All of the things that you're afraid of or anxious about or tangled up in are directing you toward your desire. It's shaping your creations, just like anything else. So in the same way, when I said if it makes you feel powerful, that's a yes to your soul. Your soul is saying yes. That's a good indication, a good metric. Fear is the same. If something is scaring you, your soul is pointing at something else. It's directive. So I don't want you to think that the idea here is to never experience fear. Or also, let me just say this. Experiencing these shadows will happen. It will happen. There may be a time when something occurs in your life and you do feel fragile and you can't handle a conversation. And fragility connected to fear is, I don't want to feel bad. I don't want to face this because it's going to hurt. We go back to the gender conversation that we had. I don't want to be misgendered because it's going to hurt. When really, it's an illusion. You're not going to get hurt. It's a sensation in your body, but it's something that you can navigate in a way that creates more stability for you. It doesn't have to hurt. Right? Or with condemning, filling your body with hatred, right? Filling your body with this is wrong and bad and shouldn't exist on the planet is a bad sensation for you. And it's also connected to fear. It's I'm feeling threatened. Something is going to be taken from me. Something is going to interrupt my creatorship. This came up yesterday during the scarcity call. Someone made the comment of, I don't know what action to take when, if I don't take this action, I'm not going to make money. When that's not true at all. Money isn't limited by action. We know that. If it were limited by action, billionaires wouldn't exist. But the fear is if I don't take action, then I'm not going to get this, that, and the other thing, and it's going to feel bad. So when something is scaring you, there's an emotion that you don't want to venture into. That's really what it is. One of the worst things about doing this work that I do is that when I say, oh, I'm going to teach a class on the 7 deadly shadows, that makes me super available to dance with all of these shadows. Because when I say I want to express, I want to teach on this, it also gives the shadow permission to study me at the same time. So it's not always fun. And I don't recommend, I can't say I recommend telling people that you want to teach about fear. Because of course, what did I wake up with this morning? A nice fat dose of anxiety, terrifying imagery in my mind, future tensing in ways that were really excruciating for me. And I'm like, oh, good. Yeah, the teachings that I want to deliver. This is why this is coming up. And all of it, every conclusion that I came to about the fear, it was health related, health anxiety. You know, that's my like signature fear. That's my signature anxiety. It always comes back to energetics. So for me, how I end up talking myself down from these fears is acknowledging what they are, right? So when I have a fear about a disease or for me, it's fear around my sexual organs is really big. And the reason for that is because I go into fear around what if I'm unable to have a healthy sex life? What if I'm unable to be in a relationship? What if something happens to my sexual organs that makes it so I'm unlovable? Which is basically just a fear of rejection. And it happens to present as health anxiety. And what this is directing me towards is a desire to anchor in well-being. We come back to the well-being, the love, the infinite God stream that is flowing that I have to make my way back to. And when a fear is showing itself to me and it's popping up, it's just saying, you don't want to feel this, you want to feel this. You want to create this. That's all it's doing. Same thing when I have driving anxiety or my driving fear comes up. In the past, I had been in some really scary car accidents. And over the years, the car accidents have gotten better, which is kind of weird to say, but there were some really scary ones. And the most recent car accident that I had was like a fender bender in a parking lot. This like young girl rear-ended me very lightly, but it did a little bit of damage to my car and nobody was hurt. And that was like the best car accident that I had ever been in. And it felt like everything had come full circle in that moment. Like I've done it. Like I've finally been through every stage. I've been through the climax of this fear of mine. But really, my car anxiety is related to what if something happens and I'm no longer able to enjoy my life the way that I do now? That's the fear. So once again, what is it pointing me back to? It's pointing me back to a desire to feel security within my travels, to feel safe in my body, to feel safe in this incarnation, to feel guided and intuitively led to all of the right places, to be so in tune that I am connected to the right moves in the right places in the right moment in the right timing, and to trust that fully, which is fully available. So this is the other thing, is that is 100% available to me. That I'm not being deprived of that. When fear presents itself, it's just, what if this bad thing happens and then you feel bad? And I have to look at how is this guiding me? Fear is a guide. It's showing you what is happening within your emotional world, what your soul is actually leading you to, and it's pointing at your desires. It's pointing at what's happening in your emotional body. It's pointing at old wounds. It's pointing at, you don't want to feel bad. So it's illuminating all of this, and it's safe. I know this is counterintuitive. It is safe for you to experience fear, and fear does not mean that you are going to negatively create something. So me having fear of driving, it's like the amount of times that I've driven my car vastly overrides something bad happening when I'm in my car. Statistically, driving is a safe thing for me to do. Statistically, when I am just looking at it from a personal data perspective. Hold on, let me tune into this next piece. When people are afraid of, what if I negatively create an experience? I've talked about this in several programs of mine, but I'm just going to include this here because it's pertinent to this conversation. Fear is slower than well-being. So when you think about I'll give you the imagery that's coming to mind. So well-being is like white rapids. Extremely fast-paced, instantaneous well-being, right? The energy of God is fast. It is faster than the speed of light. It cannot be quantified because it's always now. So that frequency, visually, it's like white rapids, but that doesn't even fully demonstrate the speed in which it moves. Because at the moment of you experiencing something that you don't like, or discovering a preference, or experiencing a trauma, the universe expands instantly. Now, fear, or any one of these shadows, is kind of like stagnant swamp water. So when you have a fear, or you're engaging in one of these shadows, it doesn't necessarily mean that something bad is going to manifest, right? So fragility is a good example of this. Even though it's swamp water, you kind of have to be there for a while. Like, it takes a while for you to prep your energetic field for something to continually reveal itself. And the more you practice it, I'm preparing myself to get hurt. I'm preparing myself to be triggered. I'm preparing myself to get offended. I'm preparing. Well, you do that enough, of course you're going to manifest it, but it doesn't mean that just because I have a chronic fear or nervousness about something happening means it's going to happen. It's more about, what are you doing with it? That's what matters most. Disease is another really good example of this. So let's think about Now, let me just add this here, because I'm sure the question of, well, what about young people who get sick, or like sick children, things like that. Now, remember, there's all sorts of variety. There's going to be infinite diversity on Earth. Healthy children and sick children are a polarity that exists on the planet. So every soul has a unique experience that it wants to have. So that's one thing that happens on Earth. But when we're talking about a disease frequency, it's a long-term experience. I was thinking about this last night. There's a body. There's a book called When the Body Says No, and it's about stress disease connection. You might love it or it might stress you out, depending. But I loved that book. It's exceptional because it's a whole bunch of studying and anecdotes and talking to doctors and looking at different research. And it's all about disease manifesting in the body. And when you look at this, there's a strong emotional connection. So he is specifically calling it stress. I'm calling it emotion. Emotion is energy. Energy is frequency. Disease is a frequency. When you're really looking at it, particularly late stage disease. So a lot of the time when you're looking at someone who is facing like cancer is a good example. Cancer takes a long time. Many cancers take a long time to develop. That's not all, but a lot of them do. That's why you see so many of them come up later in life. Now, there's always another interesting thing about death that I find is that there are so many different ways to exit Earth, and they usually, I would say always, make sense for what the person wants to experience. So, depending on what the person wants to resolve or still wants to experience, or what the family unit wants to experience, or the dynamic that someone has with their spouse, how you depart Earth is going to either give you more or less time depending on how you want to exit, depending on how long of a transition is wanted here, how long is this desired. Now, when it comes to like the cancer example, my grandmother is a perfect example of this. She spent decades with unprocessed emotion. And when unprocessed emotion has nowhere to go, it's going to manifest. And when you have decades of negative emotion, where is the energy going to go? It's got to do something. And disease makes sense when you're looking at something like sickness or death, or all of this will start to make sense when you look at it through an energetic lens. Because it's just energy, it's just frequencies. Frequencies that are harmonizing with other aspects of your life. There is this TikTok account that I have been, interested in lately, and it's this woman is a caretaker for her father who is diagnosed with dementia. And it is wild because how many of us are terrified of dementia, of a loved one getting dementia, or ourselves having some type of degenerative brain disease, right? That stuff inspires fear in a lot of people. However, when I'm looking at this account and I'm watching the interactions, because she'll record the interactions between her and her father and the conversations that they're having, I am like, this is a gift for everyone involved because of how much love is coming from this, because he doesn't have full consciousness of his past. And so he can only speak from a pure state of love and innocence. It is the most mind-blowing thing, where this thing that so many people are afraid of happening has now cracked open these people, and particularly him. And it sounds like he was an alcoholic for many years. There was all sorts of stuff going on. He had a suicide attempt. There was a lot of stuff there. Yet he doesn't have any memory of it. And so he's like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. I'm so sorry. I love you so much. It's just overflowing with love. And many people you will find who have these terrifying experiences are often the very thing that crack them open. To what? I don't know. But it's not what you think. What we think of as fear is, once again, you're probably stuck in the climax of the story. You're not looking at what's the other side. What's the resolution piece? What's the after? The after part matters a lot. Fear is just, I don't want to experience, I don't want to feel into the depth of that level of human emotion and experience, which makes sense. There's some territory that I don't want to get into. This is why some of the darkest expressions on earth, some of the things that are most absent of connectivity, inspire the most fear and cause the most perceived discomfort, because it's carrying you into a depth that you may not be able to comprehend or imagine. And there are so many things that are really, really scary that are incomprehensible, where it's like, I can't even relate to that. That's so terrible that my brain cannot wrap my mind around it. And all it is that universal expansion that we talked about on day one. That the shadow and the light expand simultaneously at the same rate. And shadow is one of those things that rapidly extends both. It's just creative jet fuel for the universe. There's a new piece that's wanting to come in. Give me a sec. So let's talk about Jesus. He's one of my favorite guides. And there's a reason why he is as famous as he is. And has remained famous. Like, famous is the right word. Everyone knows Jesus. Maybe there's some untouched peoples and tribes in different areas who don't know Jesus. But let's just say Jesus is the most famous celebrity of all time. Convince me that I'm wrong. Change my mind right now. That Jesus is the most famous celebrity. Love him or hate him, he's the most famous. And the reason being is that he is, to this day, a symbol of navigating fear. So I talk about Jesus as an exorcist because that's what he did. So I think I talked about this in the Shadow series on my podcast a little bit. But back in the day, the way that fear, like what I was talking about with the disease emotion, the disease fear connection, was really, really heightened when Jesus was around. So during his life, what they had was fever demons because there was no modern medicine, right? So disease was viewed through more of a spiritual lens, at least in how Jesus was working with it. And one of the things that he continually preached about was, it is your faith that makes this possible. So when people talk about Jesus's healings, it wasn't that he was healing the person, because he was not able to override. If you were really committed to your problem, which in that time, a lot of the time showed up as sickness, blindness, different ailments, things like that. If you were committed to that, he wouldn't be able to override it. People thought that he was intervening only because he could ground a space in a way that would abolish fear. So his connectivity to God was so potent and so strong that he could sit in a room that would completely dissolve fear. This doesn't mean that he is able to override your unique creation. That's not true. That's not true. But he was energetically dominant to the point where many people had experiences where they were healed. And one of my favorite things that Jesus said was, go forth and tell no one. This is why during the powerlessness call, I was encouraging, zip it. Don't talk to muggles about your beliefs if they're anchored into this. If it's about God, right? I'm not going to talk to my grandparents about money coming from God. And that I don't believe in scarcity or any of these things, or the absence of what I want, because I believe that everything comes from God. I'm not going to go spouting that all over the place to the muggles in my life. Go forth and tell no one, because you don't want anyone to destabilize you if you are delicate in your beliefs still. Your creative power and connection matters more, because otherwise other people have the ability to present worst fears to you. And we talked about this during that powerlessness call. It was a perfect example of it, because it was, the family member presenting doubt. And then all of a sudden not being able to get a grip as a result of this family member reflecting back, doubt, fear, that's not possible, that can't happen, da. And so you unplug. So what I want to say is, I'm doubling down on my point here, and I'm saying Jesus agrees with me in that you shouldn't talk to people about your stuff. You shouldn't talk to people about your creations. And I would also be cognizant of who you are speaking to about things that scare you. That is another excellent practice. So this morning, before this call, obviously, I had that anxiety, and my best friend wanted to get on the phone. And I was like, yes, let's get on the phone. And talking to her is good for my fear and good for my anxiety. We're very much on the same page. She gets me. She knows my beliefs. She understands that I'm creating this thing that we're doing. Like, we're on the same page. So she understands how to help me connect back to my soul. She's not going to tempt me to unplug. Sometimes I can be tempted by codependency. She can do that. She can activate that sometimes. And then I have to choose, am I going to unplug in this moment or not? But when it comes to things like fears, anxieties, stuff like that, it's a great conversation to have. And she's one of the only people that I can do this with in a very pure way. So this is why I continually talk about insulation, because there are so many things that can scare you, destabilize you, and activate these shadows more. Having higher discernment about who's your audience right now. Who are you talking to about this? Does this soothe you or activate you in a negative way? What's going on here? Pay attention to that. All of this is going to be unique to you. But connection, that's where fear is pointing you. Connection is the solution. That's why so many people were able to heal in the presence of Jesus. And if you took Dom, you know he makes an appearance in that class. And he's always coming up in my work. He shows up in the podcast from time to time, right? He's always showing up because he's like he is the best guide for fear, period. Anything that scares you, Jesus is the one. Jesus is the one. If I were ever in a scary situation, Jesus would be the one that I would want. Because that frequency is able to shift the atmosphere in a way where I want that extra support. I want to open this up for questions right now. Anything that you might have about the mechanics of this, or if you have a specific fear that you want me to help you with. Anything at all. Every time I'm waiting for comments, I want to start in on another piece. And then a comment interrupts me. I feel like people are typing. And I just don't know. I wish I could see. I wish it had those bubbles. I wish Zoom had those bubbles so I could see if people were typing comments. Okay, I'm going to talk about the spectrum. The spectrum that, if you read Conversations with God, this is in that book. The first Conversations with God book is excellent. Excellent. And they discuss the spectrum of fear and love. And pretty much anything can fit on that spectrum. So you think about love is consciousness, God, divine source. And as you get farther away from that, you will feel more and more fear. So that's the spectrum that you could put pretty much anything on. And you'll notice the tension within your body and the misery within your body will get more and more potent the farther away you get from that divine love, what I'm calling connection. You will feel worse and worse and worse and worse. So once again, this is just another way to identify where you are, what is happening. Are you connected, disconnected? I'm really surprised that no comments have come through. I was not expecting this. But the point is just using this as a way to feel your way back. All of these shadows are a compass guiding you back to your creatorship. And when fear is in the mix, right, it's let me actually shift into talking about like beneficial fear. Fear is great when there's a predator around. It's great when you have a saber-toothed tiger. It's great when there's an immediate threat and you need to flee, right? That aspect of you is helpful. Being able to feel into that is helpful. But the same goes for your inner world. So it's not just, do you need to run from this tiger? That's one side of it. But it's also, what am I doing with this thought? That also matters. So for those of you who are in Fabric of the Universe, like that is the work. But a fearful thought is guidance in the same way. Feeling fear about a tiger is guidance. It is guiding you to get out. But your inner world is operating in the same way. So it is optional for you to continually engage in fear, internal fear. Right? So just perpetual chronic fear, that's when it starts getting out of hand, because it's pointing you to movement wants to happen. Either energy wants to move, right? If I'm really anxious, energy wants to move. Things want to be rearranged. There's a piece of this that is disconnecting me, or I am disconnecting as a result of this, and I need to find my way back into connection. All of it is guidance. All of it is pointing you somewhere, and all of it is useful. I'm tuning into like the negative creation piece, because I know that like gets people tripped up a lot with manifestation, is like, oh, I made this bad thing happen. I feel like there's more for you on that. So give me a second. It's kind of like a loop that I'm afraid of creating something negative, and then that makes me afraid, and then I'm afraid, so then that causes negative creation, and then I'm afraid that I'm doing it more, and I'm afraid that I can't get out of this cycle. So it's just this loop of putting yourself in fear that you're going to feel bad. So then you feel bad, you deprive yourself of feeling good, you feel bad, and then you're afraid of feeling bad. And it's just chasing yourself constantly. And fears are generally on a thought loop. So something that you're afraid of or something anxiety producing, you will find it's a thought loop. It's repeating itself. It is just the same thought over and over and over and over and over. So what if the practice becomes, well, finish the story? I don't always recommend that people go deeper into fear. That's not always the right move, but in many ways, getting to neutrality is the process of understanding what then. Like getting to the core of fears or to the core of that worst case scenario can be helpful, because it all comes back to feeling bad. And if you can just recognize that your fears are just around feeling bad, that's it. It will help with this anxiety, and it'll point you back to the energetics no matter what. So when I'm afraid of, these mystery illnesses that I come up with in my mind, that not even a test that a doctor can give me could soothe that anxiety, well, it's go back to the energetics. If something did happen, if that worst case scenario did happen, I would go back to the energetics anyway. If I was kidnapped and bound, I would have to go back to the energetics no matter what. That would be the only way that I could rely on anything or get out of any type of dangerous situation. Like if I had nothing to do, I was just like bound in a room, immobilized. What do you think I would do? Of course, I would start like, okay, Sky Daddy, what now? What are you going to have me do now? Bring the solution. I would go back to that over and over and over, no matter how dire the situation or the consequence was. It would always bring me back to the energetics. If you're afraid of losing all your money, going bankrupt, not being able to pay for certain things, you go back to the energetics. The money is going to be an energetic relationship thing anyway. So you go back to the energetics. All of your fears can be proactively navigated by taking it to the core energetics to begin with. So sometimes going deeper into the fear, like, yeah. Okay, scary stuff. And then at the very end of that story, then what? Or how would you rebuild as a result of that? What would you do instead? How would you navigate that worst case scenario? And it can help to dampen and neutralize the severity, reconnect you with your energetics, and it just becomes, okay, so do that now. Do that reconnection work now. Get your energetics on board now. Get your emotions, get your thoughts on board now. You don't need to wait for that bad thing. Let it inspire you into connection now. And that will be a massive help to many of you. It's data, it's a compass, it's helping you point back to your creatorship. It's not an indication that something bad is going to happen. It is just a compass. Let's see if Jesus has anything else to add here. There's nothing that can't be resolved. There's nothing that can't be taken care of. There's nothing that can't be created. There's no lack of solution or resolution that exists. There's no lack. If you feel fear of a lack of solution, that's scarcity. So when you think about the infinite nature of the universe, this is why anytime, particularly around scarcity, I guide people back to the universal expansion at hand. Taking it to universal takes you out of your immediate experience, and it helps to reconnect you with the bigness and vastness of the world and humanity and the universe and creation and your own potential, your infinite potential. When you're connected, you feel invincible. Everything becomes available to you. There's nothing that you can't have or experience. And you really do have a better grip over this creation thing that you're doing. But going universal will help broaden this for you a lot. We've been talking a lot about control and surrender, obviously, because I'm launching Sub right now. And so this continually comes up. But one of the things that you will find about control and surrender, that whole dance that you're doing, is a lot of the time the negative side of control, like the piece of control that ends up feeling really hard and difficult and painful, is coming from needing to avoid all forms of pain. And so it's interesting. It's like you bring pain into the present through trying to control, or anticipate all of these negative things, these negative potentialities that you are exploring and carrying your mind through. That's usually what people are describing when they say, having control issues. Control in terms of creation, that's what Dom is all about, is taking creatorship over your experience with other people and situations and all the things in your life. That's healthy control. You want to have control over this thing that you're doing. You want to have control over this incarnation. It's way more fun that way. Dragging yourself through the mud mentally and in constant anticipation of bad things and negative things happening, that does nothing more than keep your body in that climax of the story and makes it really difficult to shift out. So that is where, yes, learning when and where to relax, to unclench, to take your claws out of things will be extremely helpful. That is a skill. So when people talk about surrender, it's this weird laissez-faire attitude. Surrender is not laissez-faire. Surrender is active. It's an active posture that is practiced. It's not forget your hopes and dreams. That's not surrender at all. It's about connecting to the universal, positioning yourself in the right energetic posture so that you can come into contact with your creations, desired creations, faster. That's surrender. That we're going over that in sub. You guys already know this. That's super exciting to talk about because it's the new energetic posture that I've mastered. Now, the other thing that I've realized, I've been focusing a lot on the shadow self, obviously, because of this masterclass and also the mini mastermind that's coming up. You will notice that your ego, your shadow self, the negative aspects of you that you don't like, that would also fall into the category of the shadow self. All of them are positioning themselves around fear. Always. Whether you have an implosive shadow or an explosive shadow. So implosive being like everything seems fine on the outside. Oh, this really, really great guy, but secretly he has a pill addiction, right? Or there's something going on that's really self-destructive. That's an implosive shadow. Self-sabotage is an implosive shadow. At least that's how I'm categorizing it. Because the shadow self is going to get its way no matter what. It has desires, it has motives, it has a function. And so there's implosive shadow and there's explosive shadow, which is I'm going to attack someone, I'm going to scream at someone, I'm going to be outwardly abusive. And I would even consider manipulation to be an explosive shadow. So even something like codependency, right? Whether you have that managerial codependency or shapeshifter, no matter what, it's outwardly expressed. And all of this is energetic posturing around fear. And so the thing that we were talking about the other day with having your own monster on a leash, which is what we're doing in Animus, is making it so that your shadow is neither implosive or explosive in its expression. You want your shadow at least my attitude towards shadow, my shadow self, and how I work with my shadow is I want it to be a full character. I want it to be this thing that I experience as a character that is connected to me intimately, that is the compilation and the continual evolution of my shadow side expanding infinitely, right? So in the same way, my light body, my soul continually expands in all of the ways that I desire. As I expand, so do the fears and the things that my shadow is going to be adapting to because my evolution has occurred. So your shadow is evolving in the same way that your soul is evolving. And what the shadow self has the potential to become is like this really well-developed character that you're in a relationship with. That way, if it's its own character that you are in relationship with, it's not going to drive you. So it's not going to implode, because you're in a relationship with it. You're going to be able to communicate with it. You're going to be able to talk to it. You're going to be able to, in your relationship, have this other character in the mix. And I have found that having this really active, robust character in my life makes it so it's not running me, and it keeps the people around me safe. So the way that the shadow self operates best, where it festers, is when it's hidden, when it's repressed, when it's not in visible range. Keeping your shadow in visible range is a really important piece to keeping you safe, so it doesn't result in that implosive nonsense, so that it's not causing a lot of self-sabotage or having you engage in really destructive behaviors, however that might manifest. And if other people can see your shadow clearly, if you can navigate around it in those intimate relationships that you have, other people being able to see your shadow clearly makes it so they don't personalize it as much, so they can speak to it in a way that is non-threatening to you. It shifts the dynamics of your relationships a lot, because you're no longer unconsciously identifying with your shadow. Because all of a sudden, when it's a character, when it's this monster that you have on a leash, then it's, I know what this is, and I know what it's doing, and I know what it wants, and I know how it sounds, and I know how it feels, and I know its motives, and I know where it came from. It has a whole backstory. It has all sorts of dark desires, and those dark desires are not going to unconsciously manifest. So this is the importance of understanding yourself in depth and not fearing the shadow, not putting it in a closet, and keeping it visible to yourself. And it's super fun, because then it becomes more theatrical. This is something that I've actually been talking about in my main mastermind, Clean, right now, my longer term mastermind, is allowing things to be theatrical so that it can neutralize it. Because if it, like we talked about with, during the, I believe it was the powerlessness call, where I was talking about like when terrible events happen, and then you have this just going on this crazy roller coaster, this carnival experience of humanity. When you can look at it from that perspective, it can neutralize this singular traumatic event or the horrible experience that you've had. And it can become this comedy, tragedy, Shakespearean energy that you have going on. And I feel the same way about the dark aspects of ourselves. So having this hyper theatrical shadow self that you have in full vivid character is an absolute gift. At least it's been the biggest gift that I've given myself, has been just creating a really wonderful, fun, expansive relationship with my shadow, and knowing that my shadow is going to evolve at the same pace, at the same rate as my soul. Your human evolves in the same way that your soul evolves. They evolve together. And you may notice when you upgrade, when you up-level your life, your shadow starts coming up with different fears. New fears emerge at new levels because you're expanding no matter what. Both are expanding no matter what. Your shadow gets to be a fully formed character. There was another piece of this that I wanted to mention here. Okay, so I was in a mastermind one time, and there was this woman who started making a lot of money. And one of the things that she shared in the group, of course, I'm keeping this anonymous, but one of the things that she shared was that she started weaponizing the money towards her husband. And it was this very possessive character that started to come out. It was, no, this is my money. This is my house. This is my stuff. I'm supporting you. It was this really wicked streak that started to come out. And I remember watching her talk about all of this, and I couldn't help but love that character. I just immediately loved that shadow. I was like, oh my God, like I had no clue that this woman had this in her. And it just created, like admiration is the only way I can express it, where I was like, God, I like that. I like that a lot. It may be really destructive in how it's manifesting, but what I could do with that character, how I could polish that up, and how much fun, that's what it was. The potential for fun with that type of shadow is unreal. And the thing is, everyone has that in them, where it's like, saying the most fucked up stuff, just the most rotten aspect of yourself has so much potential for fun. And for me, your scary bits are what I love the most. Like the dark things that you don't want to tell anyone. The scary elements of you, the dark desires are what I love hearing about. Because this is where this full character really comes into play. This well-developed character that has been expanding with you this entire time. This entire time, your shadow self has literally been with you your entire life. It has been taking in all of the same information as you, expanding at the same rate as you, navigating life with you, protecting you, serving you in all sorts of ways. And this just gets to be so much fun for people. So anyway, this has been on my mind a lot because of Animus. And this is what we're going to be doing in that mastermind. It's going to be a month of just building this character, getting to know what this character is. And of course, with my intuitive and highly visual mind, I'm going to map it out for you. So everyone in Animus, it's like I'm going to be speaking to this shadow that you have going on and what the character is like what I'm reading from you, what it sounds like, what its attitude, the clothes that it wears, right? The full vision, the full picture of this shadow character. And we're going to be working together on it for a whole month. You're just going to be building a relationship with this side of yourself. And when you do this, you're no longer afraid of it. Because the thing that woman, like I said, she was saying all these horrible things to her husband. Poor guy, bless his soul. But she was saying all these wicked things to him. And I'm like, if you just made a few adjustments, that could be fun. If you just made a few tweaks, you get to do both. You get to be wicked. You get to be a bitch. You get to do all of that stuff, but in a way that doesn't destroy your relationships. Because for me, I've got a big shadow. Like it's deep. It is a thick structure that I have within me. It is potent. And if I don't have it in visible range, if I don't know it well, if I don't know it inside and out, and I don't know that it's evolving, it has the potential to run me, and other people are at risk. I'm at risk. Everything is at risk. My relationships are at risk. Not when your shadow is in visible range. Not so much. It can still, get it. It's a shadow. Don't get me wrong. But it's nothing compared to when it's hiding in the closet, when it's festering, when it's mold spores growing all over your house. There is nothing more destructive than a shadow outside of visible range, straight up. So all of those pieces that you're struggling with, or that you are confused by, or that are seeping into your relationships or seeping into your work or making you clam up and are toying with you, it's like you've got to leash them. You've got to strap them into a harness. You have to manage them well in order for this to work. And so I find it funny because a lot of the things that people like about me is my shadow. I feel like most of the time people like me because of my shadow more than anything else, because it's the part of me that holds my personality. And so the things that you like come back to, it's how I'm working with my shadow. It's because I'm not afraid of it, and I'm certainly not trapping it in a closet. That's completely out of the question. It can't be done because I know the risks involved in that, and my shadow is too big to try to contain like that. That's unwise. So, I'm just putting this here. Know your shadow is growing, and it gets to be fun. And my intention for Animus is that it is going to be a blast. It is going to change your life. And it's giving you an ever-evolving character that you're going to have for the rest of your life. You're never going to be able to unsee your shadow after that mastermind. And of course, you get access to me. We have calls every week. And we're just going to be playing with this character. And then I'm going to show you how to implement it in your everyday, how to work with it, how to talk to it, figuring out what it wants, figuring out how to satiate it in a way that serves everyone involved, not just the shadow. Self-sabotage is something that just the shadow is getting satiated. When if you've got an abusive streak or a critical streak or anything like that, just the shadow is being served. But I promise you that your shadow has the ability to serve you and your partner and the people in your relationships and your work and all of the things. It can serve all areas. It does not have to be a self-serving, destructive entity. So that is my spiel. That is Animus. We start in September. It is obviously going to be fantastic. Sub, we have coming up mid-month, so middle of August. But the replays will be available, of course. DOM is instant access. That one I ran last year. A bundle is available. All of that stuff is available. So links will be in the description. I'll also email them to you. Any questions? We have not had any questions today, and I am baffled. And if you feel complete, this will help me. Can you just tell me that you're complete and you don't have any questions? But if you have questions, tell me now, because this is our last call. Sometimes people don't have questions because I just communicate effectively. That happens sometimes. And I'm like, really? Are you sure? Really? I answered all the questions? So it's more a personal question. I have a fear of having a daughter because of my relationship with my narcissistic mother. How would you navigate this fear or emotion? Well, once again, think about if that's your fear, what is created as a result? So it's like for me, my mom is something else. She's a horse of a different color. But I don't consider my level of consciousness is not the same type of consciousness that my mom has. So the possibility of my relationship, if I had a daughter, being the same as my relationship with my mom is impossible. It's impossible because of the work that I've done, the consciousness that I have, the understanding that I have of humans and souls and all of this stuff. It's just not possible. So there's nothing to fear because we're different. Can you speak a little bit more to like, what are you afraid of? Just it turning out bad, or you doing a bad job? Like, what is it? You being unconscious around certain things? Because that'll also help illuminate some things. But if it's just, I'm afraid of being like her, I would point back to, what is the level of work that you've done and rely on that more than anything else. I fear my deep-rooted possible unresolved wounds, like inner child stuff coming up. Oh my God. Well, yeah, children will trigger the shit out of you. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's going to be a huge, 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 it's going to activate you. So what I will say is, one, that's true for every parent. And the only thing that I would keep in mind is like differentiating, okay, this is my work. And also what type of experience, what type of environment do I want to facilitate here for this soul? How I view parenthood is you are hosting a soul. I consider parenthood to be like a hosting experience. It's way more complicated than that, but that's how I position it mentally, to create a little bit more neutrality and understanding that I'm doing some somatic healing, feel like I would fail. Okay, that one I can speak to. My parents, for all intents and purposes, failed royally. So it doesn't actually have as much to do with the parenting as people think. This is why there's no consistency. This is why people get confused as to, oh, you came from a perfectly healthy family. Why are you an addict? Well, disconnection, like I pointed out on day one, it's the disconnection factor that matters most. And what I would depend on is not how does the child turn out, or do I blow a gasket at some point, or do I get triggered, or do I do something harmful, because all of those things are possible, right? I can't use that as a metric. What I have to use as a metric is how often am I connected, and then bringing that into this parent-child dynamic. That's what you want to use. Because then it's not, failing means you are looking at either an outcome or you're using something to define failure, and that's the flawed premise that you're engaging in. Because obviously parental failure doesn't indicate how the child is going to turn out. Hello, hi. That doesn't mean anything. But then there's also, is it just like the potential that you're going to emotionally hurt your kid? Well, probably. You probably will. So that's not a good metric either. So you just want to poke around at what are you using as your indication of failure. And then you'll find like, oh, that's where the issue actually is. And also like trust. Here's what I trust. Stay connected to source. Yes. I trust the work that I've done. That's number 2. And I trust God, like just in general. If I have kids, if I don't have kids, I trust no matter what. I trust that the best possible experience is going to unfold. Period. There's nothing that I need to force or avoid or like whether I had boys or girls doesn't really matter. Like I trust the way that it would all pan out. I used to think if I ever had a daughter, like I wouldn't be a good mother for a daughter. But now I think she would turn out really cool. I think I would do a good job. It is the craziest thing for me to be saying, like, I actually think that I would be a good parent. That's a weird thing for me to say now. But that's only after years of healing. That's only because I'm regulated. I'm only now coming to that conclusion. And when my sister was living with me, she was sitting at the counter eating dinner one day. And she said, "You're qualified to be a parent." And I said, "Wow, thank you." But she knows, if there's anyone who knows if I'm qualified or not, it's her. So you don't need to be scared. There's nothing to be afraid of. Trust how it shakes out. That good things that you're available for good things. That's what I would say. And also, would love to see Mom Sydney. Yeah, I wonder. Everyone wonders how I would change. So, anyway, we'll see. Anything else, friends? You feel complete? Also, wounds are, if you're afraid of wounds and stuff like that, it's just guidance. It's just a compass. It's just a compass. That's all it is. Wounds help you create. They're an important part of the process. It shaped your expansion and evolution. Nothing has gone wrong. That's what we'll end on. Once again, I want to give such a big thank you. Thank you to all of you. This has been such a fun masterclass. I've loved these conversations. I hope they've helped you. I hope that you feel more confident and connected and capable and empowered. That's what I'm aiming at. And again, if you feel that someone could seriously benefit from these, please share. Please share these. They're going to be available forever. Feel free to come back to them anytime. And I have appreciated all of your interactions, all of your questions. And I love you all so much. And I will see you on the internet. Bye.